Welcome, students. So we've reached the end point of the semester, and we get to this junction of the course, and I always start to worry. Have I prepared my students for the real world? Um, oh, I should have told them this, or I forgot to tell them that. Oh, should have spent more time on such and such. Then the question comes to mind, what will the real world library look like in the future? Is any of this even relevant right now? And that leads me to wonder just what the library of the future that you will all be entering into, if you're not there already, what it will look like. I can make some educated guesses, but that is all they are. They're just guesses. Um, Nobody can predict the future, not that I'm aware of. Um, but my guesses are based on educated theory and judgment and from watching trends, reading articles. But again, they're still guesses. And I know that in this module, you'll be listening to a podcast by um, library futurist and a colleague of mine, Joan Fry Williams. And she makes some pretty great points as well that I hope, along with what we'll be talking about in this presentation, will give you all an idea of what I believe will be relevant to you as you enter the world of library professions. Um, let's move along here. What you see here on the whiteboard is well-known library reports. There's a Perceptions of Library reports, a report called Long Overdue, and a very recent report called Redefining the Library Experience. Um, these deal with the state of libraries and how users view us. They're very well respected, very prominent organizations have produced these. OCLC, the Pew Foundation. These are very big reports, and they've done a great service to the library profession, sharing with us surveys that they've done with library users. There's a lot here to unpack. And there's a lot here that should be raising some alarm bells for many of us. They, with the Perceptions report and the Pew report, they conducted surveys with as many as 2,500 library respondents. And they don't only pertain to public libraries, but also to academic libraries and other libraries as well. The results, I think, should be mandatory reading for every library administrator, if not every library student. And I do provide links in our module to these reports if you're interested in reading them. But if not, if you remember them later on, you can't get access to the course, they're easy to Google. I think you should definitely take a look at them. It should be clear, a clear call to action for library professionals, as particularly those of us who are getting ready to enter the library world. Take a look at this slide. It comes from the 2010 Perceptions Report, and it shows that in 2010, libraries had a negligible hold on the information search behavior of our users. In fact, as far back as 2005, the data has shown us that a user's information search does not first start at the library. I know many of us believe that we are the center of the library world or the information seeking world, but clearly our users are not using our library websites to search for information, to at least start their information search. Back in 2005, only 1% reported that they start at the library website, and now that is down to zero. And recent reports haven't shown any improvement in this area. By the way, this just isn't something that is public oriented. As I said, it's also academic oriented. There's more to uncover here, and there's a lot more to unpack that should be troubling to us. Some 91% of our users are totally satisfied with the results that they get from the search engine like Google or Yahoo or whatever search engine is used. Users believe that the information that they're gathering on these websites or on these search engines is trustworthy, or at least they are easily cross-checked by going to another search engine. So Google and these other search engines are becoming the preferred method of research for many of our users to start an information search. The report showed us that in 2005, I believe, yes, 18% of information consumers predicted that their use of libraries would decrease rather than increase. And in fact, 21% of the 2010 respondents, 5 years later, reported an actual drop in library use. So it actually was more than the expected 18%. And this despite the fact that users believe libraries exist to provide information. One important note I always want to bring up, and that we're going to return to, is that when they were asked, users were asked, what do you believe libraries are for? And almost unanimously, the respondents said books and information. But even though they that thought is in their mind of the user, their use of the library for that particular product has gone down. So unfortunately, it would appear that most users believe that information is provided via other mechanisms and other technology, and libraries is not the preferred starting point, it would appear. And over the last number of years, we've actually seemed to have lost mind share to search engines and other online resources. The results of many of the reports that we saw are shown here. What I think we have here is dramatic change. As community expectations shift, so do our libraries. This adaptability was on full display during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But as that pressure has subsided now, we're seeing widespread reflection around what libraries will look like in the future. Many library leaders are thinking about fundamental transformations with the goal of creating a more impactful library experience for their users. During the past year, OCLC Global Council and OCLC Research explored the idea, as I said, and they produced this very recent, just last year, report called Redefining the Library Experience, and Inspirations and something else. Um, but it focused on topics such as community engagement, collaboration, innovative programs that meet library users' evolving needs, and expectations that meet libraries, our users' um, expectations for us. So read that report if you can, but these are the major findings that the report has found the library of the future will need to concentrate on. They'll need to increasingly play the role of space providers. Demand for some open access in academic libraries particularly will intensify. Resource sharing consortia will increase. Partnerships with nonprofit and government agencies will increase for public libraries, at least. Academic libraries expect increased partnerships with consortia and other libraries. Library workers may see more flexible working options and access to mental health care. Additional need for data analytics is expected. The problem is our organizations, our libraries were never built to be adaptable. Those early management pioneers a few hundred years ago set out to build companies that were disciplined rather than resilient. They understood that efficiency came from routine, uh, but there are precious few incentives to abandon our routines. And the reports I'm reading do give us a lot of alarm bells. Here are some of the pass-fail negatives, and I love this sign. And it took I took this picture while doing some customer service training and touring some libraries around the United States. Genealogy materials are reference only and are not to be checked out, so don't even ask. The genealogy area is monitored with the security cameras. Smile. Library staff consistently get good marks for the service that we provide, but the environment and the rules that we see in libraries are never seen as customer friendly. How customer focused are you if you're posting a sign like this? Now, perhaps the library has had some real problems with their genealogy materials, and they want to, be extra cautious, but there are better ways to do it than this kind of condescending, um, non-customer friendly sign. The reports that I mentioned are telling us that customers or users want things like longer and more hours, additional story times, programs for families and adults as well as children, plentiful access to technology, along with the training on how to use that technology. They like an exciting bookstore look with availability of food and drink and comfortable seating. They want more personalized assistance and personalized service, and not to have that service be bound by inflexibility and rules like the sign here shows. Um, they like popular collections of books, access to streaming movies and other entertainment. They don't understand why it will take 3 to 8 weeks to get a copy of the recent bestsellers. So, as mentioned earlier, you're going to be listening this in this module, if you haven't already, to a colleague of mine, library futurist Joan Fry Williams, and she, like a lot of others, point out some truth that we as library professionals and library managers need to be considering as we quest to change our organizations and be more innovative. And the first one, I think, is that thanks to the internet, libraries are no longer the one commodity or that one place that you can get the commodity of information. But as I said, we now have competition. Information is now available anywhere, anytime, using Google, using online resources. So as you prepare to enter the world of library professions, we really have to realize that sitting back and resting on our laurels won't really work anymore. And remember that we are no longer the only game in town, right? These reports have shown us that our users can and do use information that they find elsewhere. Libraries are in a quality versus demand debate. Are we giving our users what they want, or are we giving them some version of what we think they want or what they think will be acceptable? Um, are our library staff happy with just being good enough? Or is our penchant towards mediocrity bringing down the perceptions that our public has for the relevancy of the services that we offer? Hopefully, you've learned this semester that managers and library professionals have to recognize that all services that we provide in the library have a life cycle. When you go to the store and you buy milk, you always check the life cycle, the expiration date, or the pull date, or the date that that milk is no longer good. Libraries also have a life cycle. Nothing that we provide in our collections really stays the same. So why do we feel that we need to provide services and policies in the same way? I always think back to that quote that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So we need to think differently now as we trudge into the library of the future. In the library of the future, library staff and managers do need to recognize the power that their users have in making choices on their own. with that in mind, we must consider giving control over to the user who supports our service. Isn't it true that our users are comfortable with their own devices? I would say yes. So why do we force them to use ours? You know, they come into our buildings, they're bringing their own devices, and we tell them, oh, you want to check out a book? Go over here and use our OPACs to find something. Oh, you want to do this? You need to use something that we're providing. Can't use yours. Now I recognize that yes, there are smartphone applications now that users can and do search for books on a smartphone, but they're often formatted wrong and require you to use rather clunky scrolling. They don't allow you to see things like due dates and when something is available. So we have to recognize that when our users are making the ultimate choice, uh, then our services need to match what they want. Good enough just isn't going to satisfy tomorrow's library user. I might be dating myself here. I'm a huge I Love Lucy fan. It's one of my favorite TV shows, and I've watched them probably every episode 20 or 30 times. So I like to kind of start the conversation that by asking us and asking our users and asking our students, whatever your clientele is, quote, is the library a place that you want to be? Of all the places I can be, is a library that place that I would choose? Not just the physical space, but also the online space. There's a concept coined by US sociologist, I think, Ray Oldenburg, called the third place. It describes a place outside your home or outside your work that you can relax and hang out. Your first place is your home, or a private or domestic space. The second is your work or school. So what is that third place? It's that place that you would choose to go to, hang out, relax, do something. Is the library that third place? Probably not. For a lot of people, it's an entertainment complex, maybe a mall, maybe a movie. So how do libraries become that third place? Maybe if we are to look at the information provided in the reports that I mentioned earlier, we got to start adopting tools rather than rules, choosing attitudes that exemplify the joy that many of us have or had when we entered the library profession, helping people, making others happy. So, um, libraries are very rule-based organizations. I think you'll agree. What do people see when they walk into your library? It's likely they see a sign, something like what you see here, sign that says no, 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 no. No talking loud, no cell phones, no eating, no drinking. You know, this is the way that we are welcoming our potential users by saying, if you're acting normal, acting the ways that society has trained us to act by bringing in food and bringing in drinks and bringing in your cell phones, then you're not welcome here. Hey, you know, one or two people talk too loudly on their cell phones, and all of a sudden the whole world is penalized because cell phones can no longer be used because one person wasn't cognizant or being aware of those who are around them. So we penalize the entire library world because of one person's behavior. So do we act like we want people in our library, or do we see them more as a walking workload? You, yeah, I recognize that you can't teach people to like people, but you can teach staff to work with people more effectively, to be able to enjoy their work in such a way that it's not punitive. The more that people want something, doesn't it look like we as a library organization ration it? Think about it. I was in a library over Halloween, and they had on their Halloween book this amazing book display. Um, Halloween pumpkins, kids were thriving around it. And in the center of that display was something that said only no more than two, or was it three? I don't remember. No more than two Halloween books per person. We limited we limited the choice of that user, provided this wonderful display with all these books on it, and then said, no, only one or two or three, whatever it was, per person. If this is something that the public wants, why are we rationing it? Um, if we don't want to run the risk of being seen as limiting choice, then we must allow our users to make the choices that are best for them. We need to find a way to purchase more. We need to find more books that might be appropriate on the display. Um, so it might be important to do some things differently rather than looking at doing something below standard. Um, let's think about ways that we can do something really well. Our users are our patrons, whatever you want to call them, are really confident in their own skills and their own self-reliance. Um, you probably are very well familiar with self-checkout machines in your libraries, and they are quite useful in helping the users avoid long lines, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's a great idea. There's a sense that, I can do it myself in society. We're pumping our own gas, we're getting money out of the ATM, we're ordering online, we're picking up stuff on our own that we've ordered. Maybe we're even having it delivered to our home. So there is a sense that I can do it myself. And I think we need to stop making the users feel inadequate. I remember when I was at the reference desk, seeing people walk up to the reference desk and say, I know this is a dumb question, or I have this number that I found on the computer and I don't understand what these coordinates mean. Can you just show me where this book is? They don't understand, do we? Um, but now these sorts of things are making users and customers and our patients feel inferior when they really desire to feel competent. So does it run counter to our desire to feel useful when someone says, I know this is a stupid question? So don't panic. How do we change? And I know you read some good articles and you read the textbook about this. In my own experience, there are really four levels of change, and I won't go in depth in any of this. You can really do a lot of damage to your brain when talking about change. So let me kind of pack it into these four levels. The first level being reactionary. These are those quick fixes. Something happened and I fix it. This is where many managers get lost. Unfortunately, they spend a majority of their time reacting to the little things. Um, they take little baby steps, but eventually they need to move on to that next level, the second step. And I believe this is redesigning. Um, so here we go from being reactive to redesigning the services. And in this level, we really start looking at policies and procedures that are blocking or are hindering our abilities to progress in our organizations. But again, this is in a sense reactionary, isn't it? Change the policy here and wait for it to see what happens, and then change another policy and see and wait to see what happens. But in the meantime, something else in the organization changes and we're diverted back, our attention is diverted back to the stage one. So the third level of change is what I call reframing. And it does involve a deeper level of adapted change, learning from our organizational values and our organizational belief. As an organization, we look forward and we start building a bridge to the future. And we build that bridge as we are actually walking on it, right? Um, you need to retool your car engine as you're driving. I understand that, but we do start in this reframing stage. We start applying what we have already learned, And I think leaders in this particular stage, this reframing stage, start applying their own assumptions, and they start looking at whether or not those assumptions are correct. So they're questioning and they're asking organizational questions and making other assumptions about their business. Uh, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right things for the customer? Are we doing things for ourselves rather than the customers? Is it best to be doing it in the ways that we've always done it? It seems that we are in this phase right now in our library profession, and alongside of this reframing comes the last level of change, and I would say it is called regeneration. It's a much, much, much deeper level of change than our normal state. It's that paradigm shift that you've heard about, that we always orient ourselves to the purpose that we truly value and the beliefs that we all share as an organization. We listen and we listen and we commit ourselves to the purposes that we all value trusting. And we have to accept that when we hear something in this phase that is counter to what we always believed, that we need to change. What does that mean right now? What is it? I say is maybe it's time to change our approach and stop shooting ourselves in the foot. Listen and move on. In Joan Fry Williams' podcast in this module, she states that she believes that in 50 years, we will be back to an oral society. And if we're back to an oral society, what would that mean for libraries? You know, we own this brand that we call books. And in fact, those reports that we talked about earlier, I mentioned the fact that when asked almost unanimously, when they were asked what do libraries mean or what's the purpose of libraries, people said books. Or information. When they describe a library, that's what comes to their mind. Oops, excuse me. Most companies would kill for that sort of brand recognition, something so high as that. I think as 90% of the users said, "What does a library mean to you?" And they say books. 90% of a brand is incredible for a marketing firm. Is that is that something that we can focus on? Is that something that we can take advantage of? If most companies would kill for that sort of brand recognition being so high, um, if we change from being book bound into an oral society, what would that mean for libraries in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? So we should be beating the bush as library professionals about our book brand. Show how reading helps people get smarter, and showing how much energy about reading can be promoted by our library profession. Reading seems to be an elective now. And if we believe reading is good for us and builds brains and builds stronger communities, then we need to really start being more proactive in spreading the word about books, particularly if we're shifting as a society to becoming more oral. We need to remind our community to value the books that we have in our buildings, um, especially since that is what our users believe we are to function as. Yeah. Oh, by the way, who's really good at this is children's librarians. So maybe we all need to become children's librarians and at least get inspiration from them. Again, I might be dating myself here with this reference, but those of you who remember Star Trek, you remember Spock's, I think it was a mind meld. He would put his fingers up against somebody's forehead, and he could read their minds and instantly, intuitively know what they were thinking. Wouldn't that be great if we could do that as a profession? Knowing intuitively what our civilians, our users, our patrons want from our libraries, what they want to get from our collections, what they want to see from their libraries. That would be something I think would be great for us. So If you think back to that Elmo cake, are we giving them what they want? How do we get this focus on customers? How do we start listening to our users? Our facilities are a good place to start. We should become destinations, maybe the community living room, if you will, places for the community to come together to read, to generate excitement, to meet others, to collaborate, to enjoy being in a community of others like them. In a home, I don't know if you've watched home design shows. I'm a big fan of home design shows, but I recognize that as I was watching them, they were designing these beautiful interiors, homes with beautiful bedrooms and gorgeous kitchens and wonderful living rooms that would be, the envy of any person. Um, but they've never in any of these buildings and any of their designs have created a spot for reading. I never see it. If reading is valued, how do we bring the the reading back to the user? That third place, make the library a space, give them a space for reading, give them a spot that they will feel comfortable to come and bring their own books to or read their library books. I never realize how many users value our library as a space that they could do that in. But today, in today's world and tomorrow's future libraries, the best managers will recognize that at their best, libraries have to serve as centers of discovery and centers of communication and centers of being that third place. Do people feel like we've set the library up for them to succeed, or do they feel stupid? Um, Especially for common tasks like checking the availability of materials. Um, Again, our libraries are set up using Dewey numbers or Library of Congress numbers or some other cataloging scheme, which is great for the librarians because the librarians are trained and library staffs are trained to understand what those coordinates mean. But um, the average user doesn't know that. Sure, there's people who were grown up um, back when they did library training, excuse me, and they understand what Dewey numbers mean. But for the majority of users, these library coordinates mean nothing. One of the reports mentioned the fact that I think it was 74% of our users, of library users, are what we call browsers. They don't want an exact item. They just want to browse. They want to look for something good to read, or they want some good books on um, learning the computer. So they don't have that exact number. So bringing an exact number into a library doesn't help them. But setting up our libraries in a way for the browser, who's a majority of our users, to find materials would be beneficial. Let me give you an example. This is a library in Vancouver. Unfortunately, it's not too clear, but you can see that it's set up with the browser in mind. When I took the picture, I was standing at the exact entrance of the library. So this is the first thing you see when you come into the building, um, is these wonderful collections of books. The librarians at this Vancouver library had pulled books from their general collection and put them under signs. And these signs were using common language, not Library of Congress cataloging. So instead of saying cookery, like the Library of Congress subject heading would say, it would say cookbooks. Um, so they put these books under these common signs. And we'll come back here. And how did they know which books to select to put here? The library had done the research, and they found out that the top 10 or was it 20 subjects that a majority of the readers coming into that buildings were browsing for, what they were looking for. So they placed those books front and center. So the browser came in, saw the signs for what they were looking for, they were happy, and they then would pick some of the items and then go home. It was simplified, it was easy, it was convenient. I think far too many libraries today are set up like a research library. Um, so we can organize our buildings and our facilities in such a way that make it easier for our users to find something. This is an interesting trend now in libraries and businesses, cardholder defined privileges. And this might rankle a lot of feathers out there. Like with credit cards, where you can set up your own payment date. If it's more convenient for you, I think libraries can and should utilize that same privileges, those library defined privileges, the mentality that other businesses use. Make your library card more special, more unique to you. And if it's easier for you as a library user to use your card and select your own due dates, why couldn't that be possible? In fact, it is possible. Many of our own library integrated systems will allow that capability and allow that flexibility, but libraries choose not to use them. Instead, our library cards come with a set of rules. This is a deal we're offering. I know you like a card. Here's your card. This is a deal. Take it or leave it. You get the same as everyone else. You don't like it. I'm sorry. Oh, well, that's what we offer you. We check out books for 3 weeks. They're due no later than this. Late books get a fine, blah, 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 blah. If loan periods do not match a person's reading style, that makes it difficult to be a library patron. But if it's okay to take 10 books for 3 weeks, why not be able to take 3 books for 10 weeks? It's the same economics, isn't it? Why should we should be allowing our users to pick a plan that fits their lifestyle? Maybe they check a box on their application and we as a library staff member adapt their library file for that. We edit their accounts and let them choose their own due date. Maybe even their own hold queue or maybe their own hold list. Um, these can be ranked maybe by cardholder premiums. You've been an active library user for 20 years, you get some little advantage in placing a hold before the regular user. I don't know, maybe um, if you've been a library user longer than X amount of years, maybe you get a hold period that's before everyone else who's maybe just gotten their library card. Somebody's been using the library for 20 or 25 years, or maybe they came in as a kindergartner and are now bringing their own kids into their library. These are loyal users. Wouldn't it be nice to reward them for their customer loyalty by allowing them to maybe occasionally come up to the front of a line of a popular reserve book title or um, take a book longer? Um, Sometimes I think we get caught up as an organization in equity in library use. It's a thought. This is what our users are telling us. This is an interesting demand from our users. They've told us that sometimes we are too overbearing, that we offer too much. Maybe we should start our users off by showing them where something is and then getting out of the way. Maybe check back with them later. I literally observed one librarian spending 25 minutes with a student who merely wanted to know how to find an article. Um, who they showed them the online resources and they showed them how to do advanced searching and then showed them how to filter things down and then showed them if the library computers are down, they showed them the periodical index and how to find something if the library's computer systems were down. Come with me, I'll show you how to use that. And by then the student was overwhelmed and just wanted to get out of there. So show them that you trust in their competence, but assure them that you are there if they need more additional help. Be that bookend. Ah, yes. We tend to think, at least in most of the public libraries that I've spent my time in, that our users are guilty. We have this we have this thing called, I think it's called claims returned or says returned. I don't know what you might call it, but it basically assumes guilt. Somebody comes in, they say that they want to check a book out. You scan their card, and the computer tells you that something hasn't been returned. So you say, "Oh, you didn't return blah blah blah." The customer says, "Oh, yes, I did. I think I did. I brought it in and returned it. I'm very sure I did that." So rather than just taking that off taking their word for it and taking it off their card at that point, we put this thing on it that says claims return or says return that sort of keeps the book on the record, um, but doesn't immediately fine them for it. If we find it, then we take it off their record. Wouldn't would it surprise you that when I did a report on this, a study, that 90%, 90% of the time, we do find a book that a customer has claimed return. But there are those items that we can't find, sure, and then we put it back on the customer's record, and then that confuses them when they come back and said, "I told you I returned it." Um, so shouldn't we or couldn't we treat these as exceptions rather than as designing them from a defensive standpoint? If at least 90% of the cases are resolved, then why do we put all of the customers' records in this penalty phase? Um, I think even if 90% of the cases are definitely problems that the library is mishandling a return or the customer did indeed return it and we just didn't get it off their record properly. Um, the other 10%, a majority of those people in that 10% are more than willing to come in and say, "Oh my gosh, I thought I returned this book. I was cleaning out my car, or I found it underneath the seat, or I was cleaning my kid's bedroom and I found it underneath the bed. I thought I returned it. I'm very sorry. Here, I would want to pay the fine." So even those people who thought they returned it, didn't return it, they do come back and return something later. So this whole idea of presumed guilty rather than presumed innocence, I think is something that rankles a lot of our customers. So on that note, I'm glad to see, I think a lot of libraries now, um, I don't want to say a lot of libraries, many libraries now are implementing fine-free services where people are not fined daily fines for books, etc. Um, be interesting to read a report later, 5 or 6 years from now, to see how that resolves. We do spend a lot of time as library staff collecting fines. Perhaps we spend a lot of library staff time and money um, in trying to collect a fine. I literally saw a staff member spend a good 5 or 10 minutes trying to get a 10-cent fine from a customer who claimed that they had returned a book. So they were spending maybe $10 of staff time trying to get 10 cents from a user. So something to think about. Um, Self-directed services, do it yourself. This is a trend that isn't going away no matter what we think. I know that there's many in the retail world that are debating this idea that self-directed services and self-checkouts are awful, that we're taking jobs away from people. For every person who wants to spend 5 minutes talking to the cashier about the weather, there are two or three more who just want to get in and get out without interacting. Many libraries have created services and initiatives that don't require active staff interaction or dedicated program hours, but they still interest and challenge patrons and allow them to take advantage of convenience and simplicity. Um, Users do want to play, and play is often frowned upon in our library organizations. So, as you can see in the picture here, um, this is a child that wants to check out this book, and the library staff member, or maybe it's his parent, is still there if he needs help in doing that. We don't want to abandon our users, but we're there to help them. I think it's always best to help them use the self-checkout rather than taking them over to a staff member, but we offer that service. Collaboration seems to be a new trend for libraries in this time of change. Tough times call for tough choices, you know. And one of those choices, I think, is how to get the most out of every resource that we have at hand. And one way I think is to do some strategic thinking and taking advantage of intentional partnerships and intentional collaboration. And this would extend to the library user as well, allowing them to form partnerships and collaboration within the community to create joint projects together. Maker spaces are now very, very popular, and the library of things that let users create together and check out non-traditional items from our libraries to go and use them together to maybe do community gardening or making community quilts, etc. Maybe we even think about curating information resources um, and combining information resources that we know that our library users are looking for. I think libraries can set up ways to make collaboration not only easy, but fun and successful, and maybe even doing this virtually rather than requiring people to visit the library. The stories and the history and the unique local content that we can put together and curate um, and in unique ways can become very, very valuable in our communities. You know, Google can take advantage of the search engine world, but what Google can't do is provide pictures and information about local history, content that we create that speaks to our own location and our own personal stories that can become quite valuable and something that Google or Yahoo and the others can't do. Collecting those stories, maybe it's collecting cookbooks or yearbooks and local photographs. There's this local hunger for identity. People want to know where grandma and grandpa lived and what mom was doing when she was a kid, and what people were cooking, what traditional dishes are traditional to a community. And this is something I think that we can capitalize on to make our libraries more and more useful and relevant in the future. Making something easy is something that our users are definitely asking for, and um, making something convenient is something you probably saw in your trend watching module several weeks ago. Um, just remember that making something easy is not the same as making something dumb or making something um, useless. We have to capitalize on this need and demand for simplicity and convenience. I want it now, no matter where I am, is something that our users are always clamoring for. The digital resources, full text things that can utilize get that they can be utilized when the libraries close. They're looking for less perfectionism. Sometimes libraries won't put anything out until it's perfect. You know, they they will have this great resource, but because they can't make it do one thing, they'll keep it under lock and key, or they won't use it. Maybe it's time to determine when perfectionism pays off and when it becomes a villain, when it sabotages things. So let's all work for efficiency rather than perfection. Yes, I do understand that people will be, um, they'll knock us or they'll ding us for having something out that isn't perfect, or when something um, is broken or not working correctly. But in general, I think that people will appreciate the need that we are satisfying in providing something that is making their lives easier and convenient. So as we as we finish up here, and as you get ready to forge your own path into the library of the future, remember this quote: different isn't always better, but better is always different. You will be faced with an unprecedented amount of change in the library world, and um, that that change is going to come on you when you least expect it. Just realize that you have the power to make um, it better by looking at different ways to do something. I want to thank students for listening to this presentation. I hope you've had an enlightening and very um, engaging semester. I've been extremely impressed with the professionalism of the class, the engagement that you provided, and in your discussions for the library cases, and the grades in the class certainly reflect that. I obviously, I obviously believe that you will be great custodians of the profession that we all join and are a part of, and I feel comfortable leaving you in it. So thank you everyone for listening, and I hopefully will bump into you somewhere in the library world in the future. Of course, if you have any other questions or any problems or anything until the semester actually closes, don't hesitate to let me know. Thanks again, everyone. Bye-bye.